Hey everybody, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I'm your host, Marquez Mosher, and this is my co-host, cohort, and eldest son, Austin Mosher. He and I always seem to bring out the feisty side of each other, and it leads to some very spirited conversations. There's never really any one topic. We see the world from many different perspectives, and sometimes we agree, and sometimes we don't. Either way, it gets very interesting, so sit back, relax, and have a bit of fun at our expense as we explore some of the most unexpected perspectives you'll ever hear about the world we live in. So, let's get started.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Marquez Says Show.
Whoa, what's going on here? Hold on. That's not how we do it.
I'm Says, this is Marquez.
Okay, so anyway, so moving on. Hello everybody. Marquez Mosher here. That, as you could have figured out, is Austin.
What's up?
And guess what we're going to talk about today?
What are we going to talk about today?
The media.
Ooh.
Evil or friend?
Do you know what I love about the media?
Which one? Are we talking about cassettes, CDs, newspapers?
No, not that type of media.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. That type of media I love.
What, vinyl? Vinyl versus CDs?
Vinyl
versus digital audio tapes? You know, those were just for a little while.
Digital DATs.
Yeah, remember?
Yeah, I know. We had to study DATs. We actually had to use them.
For a while there, they should have been the standard, but no. Sony didn't like them. I don't know. Sorry, Sony. I don't really know if you killed them.
No, that's actually pretty true. Yeah. Anytime there was a big revolution within any sort of music, or even... Yeah, no, I'd say music more so than DVD platforms or movie platforms, but music platforms, for sure, Sony was like the head person.
Wow, I did not know that was where that was going to go, because that is not the type of media we are talking about.
No, it is not, which is what I tried to say in the beginning.
I should have known better than to bring that up with him, but no, I am talking about mainstream media and fringe media. Are they at fault for what's going on?
Short answer? Yes.
Short answer, personal responsibility.
There is personal responsibility, but at this point, I think people are aware enough and responsible enough to realize, hey, you know what? This is wrong, yet the media is still peddling it and still showing it. And because well,
it depends on which media you're talking about, like which media outlets. Because would you consider Fox News mainstream media?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, but what's so funny about that is that so many people that watch Fox News don't consider them mainstream media. They're like, the mainstream media sucks. It's MSNBC and CNN
Fox
and
News
stuff.
Is definitely mainstream media. Like, just because it might not necessarily be the most like popular or the most like
left leaning,
right? But it is 100%. It's still huge. But Fox News is still huge.
I see and hear that all the time, though. I see about how they never mention when you say mainstream media. Actually, most of the people, I think, when I encounter them, when they talk about the media's at fault, mainstream media, they're not. They're only talking about MSNBC or CNN or any of the left-leaning, and I'm sorry, but I don't know a lot of the New York papers and the newspapers, but I know some of them obviously lean more left, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They always talk about like them, and then they'll say stuff like, where do you get your information from? Fox, Breitbart, something like that. And it's like, those are if a majority of people know what it is, that's mainstream media.
Exactly. It might not necessarily be popular ideas, but popular and mainstream aren't the same thing. And clearly, it's not that Fox News has unpopular ideas. They're just not the quote-unquote, I guess, most accepted ideas. Maybe not what most people...
They're just right-leaning. I mean, they're just...
and there's nothing inherently wrong with being a right-leaning platform.
No, not at all.
No, not at all. My bone to pick with Fox News is they often do a lot of false reporting, and they have an angle on almost everything, as all news, right. All media does.
Well,
but theirs tends to be much more.
Obvious?
Obvious.
Well, because I think this brings in kind of the next point about how, there is a lean and a slant to all of them, and it wasn't always that way, but they're now more, Fox especially, is more about entertainment and commentary as opposed to news. Now, that's also true for CNN, MSNBC, especially on the other side of like MSNBC.
Yeah, they all do it. Yeah,
and the CNN does kind of try to ride that middle ground, although they lean a little left. But right now in this political environment, while what might seem like leaning left and what might seem like constant attacks and stuff, well, the administration and the politicians in power give them a lot of ammunition. I mean, it isn't quite so hard to dig up something, to talk about or to criticize or anything of that sort.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you, though, that there's such a dichotomy when you see like a major event and you see the little scrolling of the headlines down below on each of the channels.
Yeah, they're so different.
And the editorials that you get from the newspapers, and different websites. I mean, I have a hard time believing that, like you said, this day and age, really, if you don't understand that if you're only getting your news from one place, or even if you do get it from just one source or one predominant source, to understand that you have to take it with a grain of salt. What is actually the news part of it, and what exactly is the opinion part of it?
Right. Well, and then also taking away the opinion part, because a lot of it's not even so much to me about the opinion anymore. It's about these broadcast services knowing who they're targeting. So opinion feels almost disingenuous, because it's like they're peddling a certain product to keep people coming back and watching and watching and watching and watching. And I know a lot of people that I'm going to pick on Fox News just because. For probably this whole episode, just because
they're the most lightning rod. They're the ones that
they're the lightning rod, and that's not just anything that I say about Fox News can almost certainly be applied to CNN or any other thing.
Well, I almost think that it goes one and the same with MSNBC on one side of the extreme and Fox News on the other. So I agree. Chances are, if it's generic of what you're saying about Fox, probably it could be said about MSNBC.
Right. So Fox News, the reason I'm going to pick them, and this is a little different, I think, than a lot of other news services. Fox News, so many people watch it on both sides. People on the left watch it to make fun of it and to pick stuff like, hey, you know what, that's not true, and then do their tweet firestorm or talk about it, whatever. And then people obviously on the right watch it and use it as support for what their beliefs are, or a certain take on whatever's going on, or that's just the way they lean, whatever. And so they encompass so many people like that, but they say inflammatory stuff on purpose. And I know that's going to make people that enjoy Fox News and think that it's legit, it's going to inflame them. I'm sorry. There are a lot of things that I see on that are purposely inflammatory that I can't see as any other way. Like
they're trying to stir it up, and you know what? I mean, in the end of the day, it is about eyeballs, it's viewership, readership, etc., etc. So,
and they know that, and they played that, and I'm not mad at that, because that's how you sell a product. Exactly. And I think that that's important. And I'm not saying that anybody that watches Fox News that you're wrong for doing so. But I will tell you, and I'll tell anybody to their face, the same thing, is it is a product, and they know they're selling a product. And they know that. It's just like CNN does, just like MSNBC does. The thing is those other two aren't necessarily as inflammatory or quote-unquote controversial, because that's just where we are in society right now. It's leaning that direction.
Yeah, and there is another aspect of it, is that when they talk about news, so to speak, you don't necessarily actually get a lot of the actual news and the facts and such when you watch Fox, or when you watch I guess to agree, MSNBC and stuff, and CNN and the newspapers and stuff, I take that back. The newspapers are a little bit better about reporting, and just reporting without as much commentary. But that's not what necessarily people want, which is why they're dying because they could have easily, just because they don't have a print form doesn't mean they don't have a message, or they can't get that out on websites and webs, and a lot of them have adapted and do quite well. So but ultimately, though, what we talk about is that people blame the media, and they blame the news, and I don't see that as the fault. They're looking for a scapegoat, because you have some responsibility. You don't just follow blindly. It's the royal you.
Yeah.
So it's the responsibility that we have to ourselves to understand that. Don't blame the media. It's just really blaming the media and saying, oh, this is why people are so. It's like, they are actually, is it the chicken or the egg? Which came first? Because they're giving people what they want, and people are watching it and liking it and taking it in. So,
okay.
I mean, a good example, Murder Hornets. Where'd they go?
Filler episode.
You know what I mean? It was kind of like, well, it didn't catch on, so they just let it kind of die. I mean, and that's.
Well, here's the thing. For my generation.
Get it? Murder? Die.
Oh, that was unintentional.
Yeah,
don't take the credit for it.
It wasn't very good either. So no.
All right, moving on. Okay, people in my generation, especially, we don't. I mean, we have the internet, we have social media, but we don't have just a straightforward, unbiased news. Like you were talking about how that happened before. Yeah, but in the 80s, when the 24-hour news cycle came about and everything changed and it became sensationalized, it's been a pretty rapid acceleration then, and then even still now, there's nothing that is unbiased anymore. It's all spectacle. It's all a form of entertainment, and I mean we see that today more than ever with with the way that the fear-mongering of the coronavirus, which I'm not saying wasn't necessarily justified, but there's undeniably fear-mongering in there. And then the same for what's going on with the protesting and the rioting and the looting. Only the rioting and the looting was really shown. There was a vast majority was peaceful and just marches and protests, but it wasn't really even covered. And if it was a little blip.
Yeah, and it was. It's weird. The feel-good stories usually end up at the end of the show. That's where their placement is.
If they end up there at all. Yeah. My point about the whole my generation thing, right, was this, and this is why it's not so much to me a chicken and the egg situation anymore. Is they're gone. Both of them died, and we're just stuck with the remains of what happened before us, and we're kind of dealing with the fact that we never had a choice. This was just fed to us, and a lot of people don't necessarily know the difference because they grew up on it, so they think this is the news.
It's interesting. Yes, I mean, however, if it is product, if it's what you're saying and stuff, and they're giving people what they want, then if the people wanted something else, then if they were loud enough and demanded it, they would give it to them.
Yeah, but I'm saying that I don't think everybody necessarily knows what they want or knows the difference between.
I think it's because it's human nature.
Yeah, because it's fun to see. Well, and that sounds a little weird, but it's fun to see. People want to, they see that sort of thing.
Fun is the right word, because some of the things that the news reports and stuff, it's like it's the age-old car wreck or age-old train wreck and stuff. And people,
exactly. But if you go on to some of these forums or you go online and you see stuff, it's like, oh yeah, these people, they're encouraging more bad stuff to happen, and it seems like they get an enjoyment out of it.
Well, and some
not
people
because people are getting hurt, but because they watch it and it's like an action movie to them.
Yeah,
and that's what I mean by fun.
Yeah, ultimately though it does come down to how much of it do we, those who just blindly follow certain ones, and then the ones that not only blindly follow, but then the ones who are voicing their opposition against the others by saying, you don't know what you're talking about, you're the ones that are telling lies, etc., etc., and you sit there and go, wait a second, that's in and of itself, that's the worst thing you could do, is just have that blind faith or blind loyalty to one particular outlet or one particular view, and part of that is being fed. And
I agree.
You do need, I think it's funny because a lot of times some of the people, some of the agencies and media that are covering it that are outside of the United States have a more unbiased opinion in covering the facts and stuff, events of what's going on in the U.S. and listening to some of those. And, there's also the other part of it is that some places that do go pretty down the line to just what is journalistically required, so to speak, they don't get nearly as much press, no pun intended. They don't nearly get as much attention because people don't necessarily want to think for themselves. And I think that's another major portion of it, is that we just want it given to us. We just want to be told this is what you're supposed to think. And I think a lot of people hand it over and say, you know what, this is so much easier just to believe so-and-so and so-and-so and believe this and believe that than to actually go, I don't know, that doesn't sound right. I mean, and
well, it's almost kind of like the bare minimum entry, right? So it's like citizens can feel happy because they're like, oh yeah, no, I did my duty as a citizen. I know what's going on. I saw the news. I saw this. It was given to me, right? And then, but people in those positions too that think they're giving the news or whatever. Oh, that's a question I had: are these people in high positions within, these high newscasters, like a Don Lemon or a Chris Cuomo? His brother's Andrew, right? Which one's the governor? The governor's Andrew, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so
Chris, I'm old enough to remember Mario, which is I think their father. So.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, he was a governor of New York, et cetera, or mayor, and so on and so forth. So.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, yeah. So then Chris Cuomo, the reporter, and then also people on the Fox News side though. So you got who is Sean Hannity still there? So
you got Sean Hannity. Him. I think what is it? Brett Hume. And then the ladies that you have, I think Laura Ingraham. I think I'm sorry, I don't. I'll be honest with you, I really don't watch much Fox News.
Well, Tommy Loren, and then you've got Geraldo Rivera. What's his name? I can't remember his last name.
Yeah.
But that dude, I got a bone to pick with though, because
what happened to him?
I don't even know, but that dude he's a dick.
Well, there was
I don't know.
There was a time Geraldo was a sensationalist, like a National Enquirer kind of type of thing, and then there was a time when he was considered a serious journalist, and now it seems like he's jaded. I don't really follow him much, but the few times that his name has come up, yeah, it's kind of like, wow, okay, that was not how I remember you.
The way he's spoken on hip hop in that community in the past half a decade or so or whatever has severely rubbed me the wrong way.
But again, that comes back to the whole fact that we're listening to personalities. We used to follow before, like you mentioned, the 24-hour news cycle. We had people like Walter Cronkite. You had, until he had his little bit of his blunder. You had Dan Rather. You had who's the other ABC 7? I mean, I remember when you growing up and listening to him. Like Tom Brokaw. Okay. I mean, there's some of those people that were actually, they really did just report what was going on, and they let other people around them do a lot of the commentary and stuff, but they were able to deliver what was going on, the news, and say, this is what's going on. There's been an attack. There was a protest at Kent State. One person was killed and stuff. And they would be able to just report that stuff, and you would take it in, ingest it, and decide on what you're going to do with that. And if you needed more guidance, you could listen to some of the other people that were around. They used to have, that's why those talk shows, there used to be the talk shows that people had, and the newscast. Now we just have both.
All the same thing.
Now they're all one and the same. And I think that's a huge part, because ultimately the media they're data points. That they're just inputs. They're just things that we're supposed to take in amongst all the others to decide on what we want to do.
Well, at this point, we're in an interesting age, though. It's like we have the internet. So all that data is already there. So any data that these news people are getting, we have access to, and sometimes maybe even quicker.
Yeah.
And because of the internet. So it's that, again, is what role does the mainstream media, news outlets anyway, play anymore in our society? And that's why I get that they have to become more sensationalized and more personality driven, because of the fact that we can get the raw information. So why would we get the raw information from them when we can get it ourselves?
Yeah.
So I get that. However, what I think they're undervaluing is people won't get it for themselves. And they have a responsibility, in my opinion, to be better. Just like when Jon Stewart went on Crossfire or whatever, that is exactly how I feel about this topic for the most part. Is like, do better. And we talked about this last time. It's almost everything requires people to do better, especially me.
And by
everybody has to do better, but like...
By the way, just that mention of Jon Stewart, if you haven't seen that, just the little clip where he's talking about where they're criticizing him because he's quote unquote making fun of stories of the day, and he comes across and says, I come after a guy who's puppets that are doing crank calls or something to that effect. He was like, how serious do you want to take it?
Yeah, and it's an amazing video.
It is. And then he turned it around to say, you guys are supposed to be the professionals. You're the ones who are actually supposed to be being serious, taking it seriously, looking at things from, different angles and stuff like that. That's not my job. And here we are. I don't know. It's probably a decade later. I'm not sure.
Probably almost 15 years later. It's been a while.
And here we are in the fact that we talk about right now. Some of the best insights and some of the best commentary we're getting are from the comedians of our society. They're the ones that, and not in a comedic form, in just straight up commentary about things and how things should be and how we should behave as a society and such. And it's like topsy-turvy, because now all of a sudden the nighttime hosts, the late night hosts that were supposed to be there to provide comic relief are now there as to provide the actual poignant commentary, and the normal news outlets and stuff are the ones that are providing all the commentary and all of that. And it's such a strange evolution of where the mainstream media has gone.
Yeah. To tie this into what you were talking about earlier is the personal accountability. I do think us as a group, as a community, we need to be more vocal about our demands for what we want to see in the news. However, and this is one of those few times that I'll say this, is I really don't think it's so much the people's fault on this anymore. I used to kind of think that way, but now I don't, because the media and the news, they know what they're doing. They know that what they're doing is disingenuous. Stop doing that. Media news. If you're listening to this, don't do that. You know what you're doing is wrong. Like, tone it back.
But unfortunately, they won't until it's demanded by the people. Until it's demanded that, hey, okay, we don't want so much sensationalization. We don't need as much commentary. We want a little bit more of just facts driven and stuff like that. They won't, because there's too many people that enjoy sitting down in their echo chamber, whichever one it is, and just listening to that and understanding and basically going, see, yep, I'm right. And they don't have to take one look at themselves. They don't have to look at themselves and consider whether or not, well, I'm not comfortable with that. But you know what? So-and-so said it, so I'm good with that. Because those guys, like you said, once they're off the air and stuff, they're laughing. They are just turning around, and I bet half the time some of them believe it and some of them don't with a lot of the stuff they're saying. But they know that they're going to say it on air, or they're going to write it in the newspapers. They're going to do that stuff. They're going to print it online and stuff, because those are that's what sells. That's what gets the viewership. That's what keeps them living the lifestyles that they like. And until it's not the people's fault per se, like you said, but until they want something different, and I think at some point it will. I think there will be something that will crop up where they may not have as much of a command over the airwaves or command of the population. But I think some things, I mean, in some ways, I only get the headlines and stuff, but like PolitiFact and stuff. Yeah, I don't necessarily know so much about what they're talking about with their commentary and stuff, but the highlights and there's just the news events that I get. That's perfect. It's just the facts. It's just laying out, hey, and it triggers for me to go check on something else. It's up to me to go, okay, I'd like to know a little bit more on why the jobless claims dropped. Okay, or why the stock market hit something.
That sort of stuff is okay. I'm not too familiar with Politico and stuff. I know what it is. I've seen it before and all this stuff. But that, like what you're saying, that's not mainstream enough yet. It's not big enough. Hopefully, it can become that way.
Well, and it's also in certain segments of the society. Some know Politico, some know it, and then you're right, but some don't. And the reason they don't is because I don't think they sensationalize as much.
No, exactly. Because a CNN headline or a Fox News headline are both going to have a spin on what is actually happening, which, again, I'm not saying is necessarily some horrible, super bad thing. They're catering to a market. But just as long as everybody knows it is disingenuous on both sides, that doesn't mean that they're not saying something wrong.
Right, you're right.
But it means that it's disingenuous.
But what you're going to run into is people having to admit that they're gonna argue with you that no, it's not disingenuous. That's the way it is.
Well, and they'll even say no, it's not that it's disingenuous. That's just our frame of mind. That's our belief system, and this news happens to fall into this category because this is how we think. This is how we perceive that news. We're not putting a slant on it. We're just saying it how we see it. When it's like, okay, but that's still not necessarily the truth. It's your truth, but if you're going to advertise that as the absolute truth, that is disingenuous.
Yeah, when it comes to, and I don't know. I guess I disagree with you on this fact that I don't really see them as saying that this is the truth, as much as they're saying that this is what's happening. And
but if they're saying that this is what's happening, and we're okay with what we wrote in that headline because this headline accurately describes what's happening, then they're implicitly saying, hey, this is the truth. This is what happened.
But as soon as you go into implicitly, that means that it's technically up to the person who's watching it to determine if it's the truth. Because unless they're putting up like statistics and numbers and things like that, you're right. It has that angle. It has that slant. So I can look at that, and if my perspective and mindset isn't theirs, I'm immediately going to have this incongruity and not
but
see
it doesn't matter, because to the person who said it or posted it or wrote that, this comes back to the disingenuous thing. They might not always mean that, so they very well might be lying and not see it that way or whatever. But no, there's always, it's not just the person seeing that in their interpretation. There's two interpretations always. Whatever the person is saying.
Yeah, that's communication.
Right. So whatever they're saying in their intention.
Right.
And then
How
the reader's. Right.
Yeah.
And then the reader's intention of looking at it. So no, I don't necessarily agree that it's only the person reading that headline and be like, okay, well now I get to decide if it's the truth or not because somebody already decided it's the truth.
Well, I don't think they decided it was the truth. I think they just decided that's the message that they want to get out.
But all likely it's their truth. That's why they're getting it out. Is they
No,
believe that.
I guess I agree with you in the back end of it. Is that I don't necessarily think they think it's. I guess in some way I can see where you're saying that it's their truth.
And this is only to people that actually mean what they're saying. Like I said, I do believe most of everything is just for the clicks. So I'm not even sure that a lot of, on any side is really meaning what they're sending out. Because again, I will stick to my point of being disingenuous. I've said that a lot, but that's just my big talking point is I agree with that. But if they do believe it, then the advertisement of this as an absolute truth is disingenuous on another level.
Maybe I'm already skeptical enough that I don't take any of it as the truth, so to speak.
And this is why I say that. Is anybody like a reporter at Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, they're all going to say, hey, no, what I said, I mean that. I wasn't doing it for clicks. This is
Well, some of the reporters, okay, this is a great part that we've completely ignored so far. There is actual reporters and actual like broadcasters and stuff, and then there's actually the talking heads and the commentary people. There is a difference between those two. And so a lot of times when you're actually hearing, even on Fox News, unfortunately a couple of them have recently retired or left, that they did do news with very little commentary. And they're kind of getting pushed out.
Because despite what anybody wants to tell you, they're aware that they're becoming much more of an entertainment factor.
Right. So those ones, so there is some that are still that they try to do, and there's a mixture now where a lot of, I think that's where it comes down to with CNN. CNN does a little bit of both in the sense that they have the same person reporting some factual stuff, and the same person also doing some of the commentary.
Right.
And a lot of times they'll do it in segments, or sometimes it's mixed. What I find on MSNBC is most of the time it's commentary. I mean, they have their figures and stuff, but they make it look the way they want to make it look. And of course, the same is true on Fox News. They do it. So that's because, and I think that's the difference between, and that I think that's exactly how they want to market it. Fox News, that they're being inflammatory because they know that they want to keep a very engaged. They want to make sure things are very, very engaged. MSNBC tries to be so much more subtle and so much more, for lack of a better word, classy, but I don't think that's necessarily the right word. But they try to keep it much more in the highbrow, so to speak. And then CNN is trying to play that middle. They're really trying to play the middle. And all of them have their...
anybody's really in the middle, even CNN, because just watching...
Well, they're not as inflammatory.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they're in the middle. It just means they're good at not stirring.
Well, I'm talking about the middle between MSNBC and Fox. I don't think they're right in the middle. I think they lean a little bit more left too, as well. But my point being though is that they're not trying to be as flashy as Fox is, and they're not trying to be quite as almost argumentative as MSNBC. So
argumentative, sure. I'll say that they're generally pretty passive. However, Don Lemon does say a lot of things.
Well, yeah, he's straight, but that's straight, like almost straight commentary.
Exactly, and I don't necessarily. It's not even that I necessarily disagree with the stuff Don Lemon says. For the most part, I actually do agree with it. I think he's actually like he's an emotional, very passionate person. And for them, I haven't heard anything I disagree with.
I agree with you, but he's just.
But I'm just saying, as I wouldn't necessarily say it's not. There's not an agenda, or that it's in not. Or that it is in the middle.
It's not that they have it. No, and I don't. And I guess I should say. I mean, they're more in the middle of the other two networks. I'm not talking about the political spectrum.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the political spectrum.
Okay, I get you. That makes sense.
I'm talking about that. They try to basically, you've got left, you've got right, and you've got middle. They're trying to get to the middle. I don't mean on the political spectrum.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I think there's also something that we can touch on here, but we'll probably save for another episode, is that we have this conversation where when you have the left and you have the right, and you talk about traditional liberalism, traditional conservatism,
right?
And when you go to the extremes of either one, one of them is for status quo, One of them is for keeping things the same.
Right.
One of them is not necessarily for progress because they want to keep it things comfortable and they want to keep things stagnant.
Don't fix
it. And then you have the other side, which is moving forward. Now, you may disagree with how they're moving forward, and a lot of times they're moving forward too quickly, not in the right way, et cetera, et cetera. But ultimately, it's about moving forward, creating more unity, creating more understanding, broadening, learning, and stuff. So, in and of itself, there is the in and of itself between those two, people are going to want to lean towards one is a little bit more optimistic. The other one's a little bit more realistic. And the realistic is the one that kind of is going to eventually not happen because nothing stays the same. Nothing is stagnant.
Yeah.
So if you find yourself falling into those categories, you're probably going to be attacked just because of the fact that there's no other way it can go. And the opposite of that is when you're the one trying to move forward and stuff, you're going to open up yourself to how you do it. If you don't do it well, or if you're doing it destructively, or you're doing it too quickly, or whatever the case is, then you open up yourself. But that's the basic, and that's what I think the news medias are playing to. They're playing to all of that. And ultimately, it does come down to where do you find yourself on that spectrum? Where do you find yourself thinking about, what it is, as far as conservatism and liberalism? Because, that's kind of where this ends up going when you're going to talk about the news media, how your political views are, what your view of society is, and it's like I use the example of environmentalism. One is we don't want to protect. The true conservative is we don't necessarily need to protect too much. It's going to be fine. Let the market play out, and let it play out for itself. It'll work itself out between capitalism, et cetera, et cetera. On the other side, you got, no, we have to be proactive. We have to have the big Green Deal. We have to be able to save as much as we can. We're destroying the earth and stuff. Between those two extremes, which one would you find yourself on if you have to choose between those two extremes?
And we've talked about this and we've argued about this. I don't think that it's so much the true conservatives' view anymore to say, forget the environment, it'll work itself out.
Well, and you're right.
I don't think that's really what...
I don't think it's necessarily forget the environment, but I do believe that we've done enough. We don't need to do any more.
I think it's more so, look, let the private sector take care of this. We are not going to... Which is what I think is more so what it is instead of...
Yeah, but I think you're right about that. And that ties into the fact of less government. Smaller government, fiscally conservative, responsible, and stuff like that. So yes, however, it's been proven over and over again, especially
the private sector won't.
Exactly, especially since we've had over 100 years since the Industrial Revolution, more than that.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen. It's just that's not going to happen. You're not going to have the private sector be able to take care of it. So it brings you to that fact of, so what do you do? So does a conservative then say, well, I guess I'm going to have to ease up on that part of my opinion? Does that mean I'm going to have to kind of, change a little bit and lean towards, I guess it's okay for the government to step in here? But then again, that creates a whole host of problems because, well, if you start to go doing that, how much of a true conservative are you?
Yeah.
And then I have to admit when I'm wrong. And
that sort of tribalism is part of the problem, though. Nobody should be thinking like, oh, well, I'm a conservative, and because I'm a conservative, if I do this, I am less conservative.
Absolutely.
Or the exact same thing is that, well, I am a liberal, and if I do this, I am less liberal. And what does that make me? You shouldn't be defining yourself by any one singular quality, whether that be liberal, conservative, or anything else. Right, moderate. And it doesn't even just apply to politics or anything like that. You should never let one defining thing be like your thing. And then if you don't do that, or if you do something against what you're technically on brand for, that shouldn't be a factor. Right. Well, it should be, what do you believe in?
Okay, I'm gonna except for unless you're an optimist. Because I'm an eternal optimist, and I'm going to stick to that. I want to say optimist.
Okay, but you can't. If you're optimistic all the time, is that optimistic, or is that just your reality?
A little bit of both. But
okay, but
see,
if
being
you're
optimistic all the time doesn't mean you don't get down. being an optimist doesn't mean that you don't get down, you don't get upset and things like that. It just means that you believe that you're going to have something that's worthwhile and positive or good down the road. So, but we digress. We'll talk about that another time. But yes, I agree with you. You cannot identify, and it comes back to that blind faith, that blind loyalty, which the media tie into. They go, oh, you know what? There's a big enough
exploit.
Right. There's a big enough group here that believes that they're conservatives or liberals or moderates and stuff. So we're going to use that. And if there's enough there that we can make a decent living, decent income, decent profits and everything, we'll go with it. But it contributes, like you said, to the tribalism of, are you a conservative? Are you a liberal? And then a lot of it has to be right now within the political parties. You've got conservatives that are true conservatives. They can't even speak up because technically the Republican Party isn't conservative by nature right now.
No, it's not.
It is actually some sort of weird
spin-off version.
Yeah, it's just because they don't. Right now, the administrations don't care about the national debt. They don't care about fiscal responsibility. They're not thinking about any of that stuff. And then on the other side, you've got, it's not quite as bad, but the liberalism is obviously overtaking it with thinking about the Great Green Deal. Is that what they're calling it? Yeah. New Green Deal, that's it. New Green Deal and stuff like that, and how that needs to be minimum living wage versus minimum wage, and all of these things. So both of them are like, wait a second, hold on. There used to be a time when those were just extremes, and the moderates in the middle were what were getting things done.
Yeah.
Where is that? I mean, because it would be good to have some actual conservative Republicans that could speak out about conservative things and not necessarily feel the wrath of what the Trump administration are going to do.
Yeah, I mean, and there is a good group of Republicans who are doing that, who do think that, but they don't have the power right now. Right, they don't have the power because of the Trump administration. And look, if you're a Trump supporter at this point, that's fine. Believe what you want to believe. But to say that he's not just throwing stuff at the wall right now to see what sticks to get reelected is false.
Yeah.
That is exactly what he's doing. I hate to break it to you. I'm sorry. But that is exactly what he's doing right now.
Yep. And it's funny because for Joe Biden, all he needs to do basically right now is do the what you've done all the time. I was going to say normal stuff. But if he just sticks to what a politician can do right now, he can just make that through. But he's got a balance between the AOCs of the world. And see, I'm all for it. I think you need the extremes. You have to have the extremes.
You have to have everybody represented, right,
because that's what pushes you. That's what pushes people to the left, which can be good, and pushes people to the right. You have to have those extremes, but they can't be the ones in control.
Right.
That's the problem.
I'm honestly pissed that Joe Biden is our best shot at a future for America in the immediate.
You know what? And you know what? I actually, because you've made some good points and we've had these conversations, I think, quite honestly, I want to change my perspective on it. And my idea is that right now, he isn't going to necessarily hurt America. He may not necessarily improve it. And to some, he might hurt it. And I get that. And I shouldn't say that. I'm talking about like overall. But if we keep going in the direction we're going now with the current administration and with Trump, that is going to hurt us. That is going to set us back. We are a laughing stock in the worldview. Maybe not as much domestically, because quite honestly, domestically, another 4 years, Trump wins, another 4 years, I guarantee you it'll be a Democrat next one after that. Just because that's a cycle. You can actually just count on it. You can go back hundreds.
I mean,
and if he doesn't, and we get it right now, then maybe we can start moving forward, or at least in a different direction, away from what we've been. And then in 4 years from now, so I don't worry so much about the economy as much as I worry about the fiber, that moral fiber, or whatever you want to call that, of what's going on and how we are viewed in the world. Because whether or not you want to believe that, be an isolationist or just so on and so forth, that's foolish. It's just a foolish notion, because we are a global economy. We are a global society. There is no way around to say that we're not. We can't go back. We can't go backwards. And
I don't think it's about going backwards or not being a global economy. I think it's about putting more focus into what's actually happening right now in our own backyards. And I do think that is important.
because
it is. We've neglected it for I don't even know, for a very long time now. And honestly, we do kind of need to get back to that sort of thing, but we need to do it with somebody who knows how to actually lead. And
I think this is a good point of saying that we were on a completely different trajectory when we started with Clinton, because he put us into, at that time, a baby boomer in the office. A young baby boomer, but one nonetheless. That worked out more or less overall. I mean, I'm not talking about whether it was wrong or right in political stuff. I'm just talking about overall. When you look back now, because we can look at history and go, not so bad.
Right.
You know, I mean, and yes, you can look back at times like Nixon era and stuff and go, that was bad. Jimmy Carter, that was bad. Yeah. You know, ultimately it was a net negative. Clinton was more or less a net positive. Then you had Bush.
He balanced the debt. And all that stuff.
We had a balanced budget.
No, whether you like him or not, it was definitely a net positive.
And then you have Bush, which, you know, again, I think ultimately probably a net positive. I think overall,
maybe now in retrospect,
yeah, of course,
but not at the time,
right? And there's, I mean, and we can argue this back and forth. Don't get me wrong on that. But and then we have Obama, and essentially net positive. Now history is starting to realize now. Was it great? Was it as much? I don't know. History hasn't quite written that bull or that chapter yet. But we can already right now go back and look at from between 2016 to 2020 and look and go, okay, this presidency was all over the freaking place. I mean, we right now it would be a net negative. We have more unrest. Definitely. We have more strife. We've had all these other things that may have occurred in the other ones. And there's not enough time for him to pull it out for right now. I mean, as far as the next 6 months, if he gets elected again. But this is the thing. Has he shown in that administration and all of that whole side of the political spectrum, have they shown any signs whatsoever that it would be any different?
No.
See, that's changed because all those other people I mentioned, it changed. They changed. They got hammered for not being liberal enough on some of them. They got hammered for not being conservative enough on some of them.
Yep.
But they were all able to manage it and ultimately try to push forward for the U.S. And I do believe
and admit their faults in some way or another.
Yeah.
Trump has not done that. Trump won't do that. And anybody that knows me knows that I've been trying to be. Not enabling. I hate Trump. I always have, but I've been trying to more or less not be like, oh, F this guy all the time.
Right, because
I'm hoping that something happens, but it won't. Well, and I've gotten to that point.
And there is certain things that he has done and inadvertently created a good conversation.
That wasn't his intention at all.
Right, it wasn't necessarily the intention, but it did create a good conversation. And some things may have been like, well, you know what, that's good because we did need to do that, and he did it. The problem is he may have done it for the wrong reasons, and also
would have happened anyway.
Yeah, and he also didn't necessarily think about the repercussions that came along with it and how he did it, and that's a huge part because it doesn't outweigh the baggage. Any incremental positive things that he may or may not have done doesn't outweigh the other stuff. And I made this comment to someone the other day was that ultimately whatever he has done can be done by the next president. Whether it's Democrat or Republican, whatever those good things that people can agree,
and
generally
honestly,
agree.
Probably better.
Yeah, they can do it. But guess what? That next pair, this is where it ties into like Joe Biden. But the next one, assuming it's not him, the next one won't have the baggage, or at least as much. Who knows? We don't really know. But won't have nearly the baggage and bring us down like he did. So hence, you can look at it from the positive of, I told April, my wife, I told her if I was a Republican operative right now, if I was like a Republican advisor, I would tell him, you know what, lose this election. Because even if we get it, we may lose the Senate. We don't have the House. We got 4 more years of dealing with him. And we're going to lose the next one anyway. We're going to lose the next one anyway.
Yeah. So what do you mean telling Trump to lose? What do you mean?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, but nobody can control Trump.
No, not necessarily Trump, but basically the Republican Party and stuff. They don't have to rally so much. They can actually start coming out against him. And then, like I said, this is if I was a Republican, and it looks it's kind of all of that it's counterintuitive. I mean, it's like Freakonomics, which is, if you haven't read that book and stuff, it's an awesome book. But it's the perspective.
What's the long game?
It's looking at it going, you're going to lose in 4 years anyway. And when can you possibly do? What can you possibly get accomplished in the next 4 if he gets elected?
Well, this is what I could see a potential angle happening is the Republicans will start to angle if Trump gets reelected and if Trump has a really bad second term.
If?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying hypothetically.
Okay.
If
they'll turn on him
and
try to get another
exactly.
Republican.
And I think they're going to basically distance. Oh, well, he's no longer. He doesn't represent our views anymore. But
history is
use it to lobby somebody into.
Except for George H.W. Bush coming after Reagan, which was an unprecedented time, a unprecedented situation. That's the only time in recent memory where you've had one political party in office for 3 terms. Everything else has been
one term.
No, 3. The same political party. Reagan, Bush.
I thought you were talking. Yeah.
So that's the only time. And if you go back, it was 4-4, 8-4, 8-4-4, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I get
so
you.
the chances of him, if he gets elected, and then the chances of it going so good that everybody wants to keep a Republican in, are virtually nil. So
no, I understand that. That's why they're gonna, if they want to get a Republican in office, if Trump wins again, they're gonna have to distance and basically say, hey, this isn't.
But even if they do that, history shows, and even if it's not even just history, just common sense will tell you that
I know history
there's no way that basically the independents and stuff will trust the Republicans to go, wait a second, okay, now you're turning on the guy that we just had for 8 years and you want us to vote for the next one?
I agree.
It's not going to happen.
I agree it'll be a huge uphill battle, but I don't think it's necessarily as impossible, and the reason is because there has not ever been a president as divisive as Trump has been.
But think about it right now, though. If you basically just let it go, but you don't have to necessarily go against him and stuff, but if he doesn't win now, you have a great chance that in 4 years from now, if you have Joe Biden in there, especially if you think he's as weak a candidate as most people think, he's just very run-of-the-mill, just generic.
I think we'll get somebody else.
Right. So
I hope
that's what I mean. He'll turn him into a 4-year, one-term president, and then you have an even fight again after him. Because chances are, he's not going to necessarily do anything so wonderful that people are going to want to put him in for another term.
Yeah.
So this is the argument that I'm saying. So anyway,
that's a good point.
As we're wrapping this up, so that's how this media, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, caters to this conversation of the tribalism back and forth about what's good, what's bad, and how it ties into the political system right now of the extremes, the tribalism, and how we need to start thinking of on our own. And applying a little bit more critical thinking, which we'll do another subject all alone. So, yeah. Well, any closing thoughts on that?
No,
it was covered.
I can't think. We covered a lot.
There's a lot of stuff there that we're going to definitely want to pick up on different.
I feel like there was one thing I wanted to go off on, but I can't remember exactly what it is. Maybe I'll remember for next episode or something like that.
Yeah, these are going to be reoccurring themes. If you haven't listened to the other 2 episodes, these 3 are probably going to be reoccurring. So I would encourage you to go check out the other 2 as well. And we're going to keep doing this. So
I guess my closing thought, I encourage you all to pay attention to what's going on as far as the defunding the police movement. I think that is, I know this is totally off on a tangent. I'll just end it with this, but pay attention to it. It's important. When they say defund the police, they're not saying take away all the money. They're saying redirect it to other programs that need it.
And I actually read an article about this, that they're not even actually cutting the budget. They're cutting the proposed future budget. They're not actually, for LA, for the Los Angeles one, they're not cutting the existing budget. The allocation that they were going to increase it is going towards communities of color to invest into them.
Right.
Because right now, that's a very important thing.
That's important. The defunding. We were talking about legislation last time, and that's what made me think of this. This is different than legislation. It's in the same wheelhouse, but it's a little different. And honestly, this is probably more important. I wasn't as informed last time.
Look into that. And defunding is actually not the right word. It's just not the right word.
Well, it's redirecting. It's redirecting money that would have gone to the police departments, but instead it's going to underserved communities, and that's a good idea.
Yep. So there's a little bit of pay attention for next time, something else on the radar. So in the meantime, think more, care more, live more, and remember, you can change your life. We can change the world one decision at a time. We will talk to you soon.